The ranch had been empty so long that even the wind seemed to forget it had a purpose there. Fences leaned like tired men, the well bucket hung crooked on its rope, and dry grass whispered across the land as if sharing secrets no one cared to hear anymore. Folks in the nearest town said the place was cursed, though they never agreed on why. Some claimed sickness ran through the family that once lived there. Others swore strange lights burned in the windows years after the last owner disappeared. Still, when the county listed the abandoned ranch for $1, a man with little left to lose decided it was worth the gamble. He arrived just after sunrise, driving a truck older than most of the buildings still standing. Dust followed him down the long dirt road like a ghost reluctant to let go. The land stretched wide and lonely under a pale sky, miles of open country broken only by a weather-beaten house and a collapsing barn. It was the kind of place people once crossed oceans to claim, believing hard work could turn empty soil into a future. Now it looked like the future had packed up and left. The man stepped out slowly, boots crunching against gravel. He carried everything he owned in the back of that truck, a bedroll, a toolbox, and a stubborn belief that starting over was still possible. The ranch smelled of sunburned wood and forgotten seasons. Boards creaked under his weight as he climbed the porch, each step sounding louder than it should in the silence. The front door stood half open, moving slightly with the breeze, as though inviting him in or warning him away. Inside, dust floated through thin beams of light. Old furniture remained where it had been abandoned decades earlier. A cracked table sat near the window, and a rusted stove leaned against the wall. Someone had left in a hurry once, leaving behind small pieces of ordinary life, a chipped mug, a faded blanket, a child's drawing pinned crookily to the wall. That was the first thing that made him pause. He told himself it meant nothing. Families left things behind all the time. Still, the air felt warmer inside than it should have been, as if the house had been lived in recently. He checked the back rooms, expecting raccoons or broken windows, but instead he found something stranger. Footprints in the dust. Small ones. Fresh enough that the edges had not yet softened. The wind outside picked up, rattling the loose shutters. He turned toward the hallway, listening carefully. At first there was only silence. Then came the faint sound of movement, quick and careful, like someone trying not to be heard. He followed the noise to a half-closed door near the end of the hall. His hand rested against the wood for a moment before pushing it open. The room beyond was dim, curtains drawn tight against the sun. For a heartbeat he thought it was empty. Then he saw her. A young girl stood near the far wall, watching him with wide, guarded eyes, as though she had been waiting for someone to arrive but had not expected it to be him. Neither spoke. The house seemed to hold its breath around them, and in that long, uneasy silence, he realized buying an abandoned ranch for $1 might have been the cheapest part of what he had just stepped into. The girl did not move when the door opened. She stood still, shoulders tense, hands curled tightly at her sides as if ready to run at the smallest wrong move. Dust drifted through the thin light behind him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The man lifted his hands slightly, palms open, the way someone might approach a frightened animal. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quietly. Her eyes studied him, careful and sharp beyond her years. She looked no older than 12, maybe younger, her dress worn but clean, dark hair falling loosely around her face. What unsettled him most was not her presence, but how natural she looked standing there, as if the abandoned ranch still belonged to her. "You bought it?" she said at last. Her voice was soft but steady. The words caught him off guard. "Seems that way," he replied. "County office handed me the papers yesterday." She lowered her gaze briefly, and something like disappointment crossed her face. Not fear, not surprise. Disappointment, as if she had hoped the ranch would stay forgotten a little longer. He glanced around the room. A blanket lay folded neatly in one corner. A lantern rested on the floor beside a stack of old books. Someone had been living here, not just hiding. The air carried the faint smell of smoke from recent fires, proof that the house was not as empty as the town believed. "You here alone?" he asked. The girl hesitated. Outside, the wind pushed against the walls, making the old boards groan. She nodded once but did not explain further. He felt a weight settle in his chest. The townspeople had spoken about the abandoned ranch like it was a story meant to scare children, a piece of land no sensible person would touch. Yet no one had mentioned a child. Either they truly did not know, or they had chosen not to. "I won't throw you out," he said carefully. "Not today." Her shoulders relaxed just a little, though her eyes remained watchful. She moved toward the window and pulled the curtain aside enough to look outside, checking the open land the way a lookout watches for danger. "They come sometimes," she said. "Who does?" She did not answer right away. Instead, she watched the distant road stretching toward town. The man followed her gaze but saw nothing except empty prairie and broken fence posts leaning into the wind. "People looking for something," she finally said. "They think it's still here." A chill ran through him despite the heat of the afternoon. The ranch suddenly felt less like a cheap purchase and more like unfinished business left behind by strangers long gone. He remembered the clerk at the county office sliding the papers across the desk too quickly, avoiding conversation. He remembered how the locals went quiet when he mentioned the property. "What are they looking for?" he asked. The girl turned back toward him, uncertainty flickering across her face, as if deciding how much to trust a man she had known for less than a minute. "My father said never to tell," she whispered. "He said the ranch keeps secrets and secrets keep you alive." The words lingered heavily in the room. Before he could respond, a distant sound carried through the open fields. An engine, faint but growing louder. The girl stiffened instantly. Fear replaced her calm expression as she stepped away from the window. "They're early," she said. The man moved toward the porch, heart beating faster, unsure why a simple sound could feel like a warning. Dust began to rise along the far road, curling into the sky as a vehicle approached the abandoned ranch. And standing there, watching that cloud of dust roll closer, he understood one thing clearly: whoever was coming believed this land still belonged to them. The engine noise grew louder, rolling across the dry land like distant thunder. The man stood at the edge of the porch, one hand resting against a splintered post, watching the dust cloud creep closer along the narrow road. The ranch suddenly felt smaller, exposed in the wide emptiness of the prairie. Behind him, he could hear the girl moving quickly inside, her footsteps light but urgent. "They don't stop unless they see someone," she called from the doorway. "Sometimes they just drive past." "Sometimes they don't." He turned back toward her. "You've seen them before?" She nodded, clutching the edge of the doorframe. "Since last winter." That answer raised more questions than it settled. Winter meant she had been here alone for months, surviving through cold nights and empty fields. He tried to imagine a child keeping fires lit, finding food, and hiding from strangers, while the town carried on as if the ranch were abandoned. The thought sat heavy in his mind. The vehicle came into view at last, an old pickup bouncing along the uneven path. Its paint was faded, windows darkened by dust. It slowed as it approached the broken fence line, engine rumbling low. The man felt a strange pull between standing his ground and stepping back inside. This was his property now, at least on paper, but ownership felt thin against whatever history lived here. He stepped down from the porch anyway. The truck stopped several yards away. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a tall figure climbed out, hat pulled low against the sun. The distance hid most details, but the posture carried confidence, the kind that comes from believing you belong somewhere. "Didn't expect company," the stranger called out. "Just moved in," the man replied, keeping his voice steady. The stranger looked toward the house, eyes lingering on the windows as if searching for movement. The man resisted the urge to glance back at the girl. Something told him she did not want to be seen. "Place was supposed to stay empty," the stranger said casually, though the words carried weight. "Town usually knows better than to sell land like this." "It was legal," the man answered. $1 and a signature. A faint smile crossed the stranger's face, but it did not reach his eyes. "Paper doesn't change history." Silence stretched between them, filled only by the wind moving through dry grass. The man noticed another vehicle far behind on the road, barely visible but heading the same direction. His stomach tightened. Back inside, the girl watched through a narrow crack in the curtain. She recognized the truck immediately. The same one that came every few weeks, circling the ranch, stopping near the barn, sometimes digging in the dirt before leaving empty-handed. Her father had warned her about men who chased rumors harder than truth. She remembered the last night she saw him, his voice low as he packed supplies. He had told her the ranch held something people would never stop searching for, something tied to mistakes made long before she was born. He promised he would return before the snow melted. Spring had come and gone without him. Outside, the stranger took a few steps closer to the porch. "You planning to stay long?" he asked. The question sounded simple, yet it felt like a test. The man crossed his arms. "Long enough to fix what's broken." The stranger's gaze drifted again toward the house, lingering just long enough to raise suspicion. The distant second vehicle grew louder, its engine joining the first like an echo. 2 trucks now, 2 sets of strangers. And a ranch filled with secrets neither of them fully understood. From inside, the girl whispered under her breath, barely audible even to herself. "They finally found it?" The second truck rolled closer, its tires crushing dry weeds as it pulled beside the first. The quiet ranch, empty for years, now felt crowded and restless. The man stood firm near the porch steps, though his pulse beat harder with every passing second. 2 vehicles meant this was no casual visit. Whatever these strangers wanted had brought them back again, and now he was standing directly in their way. The first stranger glanced toward the arriving truck and gave a small nod, as if confirming something already decided. Another man stepped out from the second vehicle, older, slower in his movements, but carrying the same air of certainty. Their eyes swept across the land, studying the house, the barn, even the broken fence posts, like men measuring territory rather than visiting it. "You should have asked around before buying this place," the older one said. His voice was calm, almost friendly, which made it more unsettling. "Some land carries obligations. I bought land," the man replied. "Not obligations?" The older stranger smiled faintly. "That depends on what's buried under it." The words settled heavily in the air. Behind the curtains, the girl closed her eyes for a moment. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind. He had always said the ranch was never truly abandoned, only waiting. She watched the new owner standing alone outside, realizing he had no idea how deep the trouble ran. Yet he had not walked away when he found her. That mattered more than she expected. Outside, the wind picked up, pushing dust across the yard and rattling the loose boards of the barn. One of the strangers began walking slowly toward it, boots crunching with deliberate steps. The man instinctively moved to block the path. "Barn's unsafe," he said. "Roof could fall." The stranger stopped, amused. "Funny, it's been standing fine for decades." A tense silence followed. The man felt the weight of the moment pressing in from all sides. He did not know what they were searching for, but he understood one thing clearly: letting them roam freely would change everything. The ranch no longer felt like a fresh start. It felt like a line drawn in the dirt. From inside, the girl made a decision. She slipped away from the window and hurried down the narrow hallway toward the back room. Floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet. Hidden beneath loose planks near the fireplace was a small metal box her father had shown her once, warning her never to touch it unless strangers came looking. Her hands trembled as she knelt and lifted the board. The box remained exactly where it had been left, cold and heavy. Outside voices grew louder, sharper now, as patience began to wear thin. "You don't understand what you bought," the older man called toward the porch. "That ranch belongs to a story that never finished." "Then maybe it finishes now," the man answered, though uncertainty tugged at him. The strangers exchanged looks. One of them stepped forward again, no longer pretending this was a friendly conversation. The air felt charged, as if the land itself were waiting for something to break. Inside, the girl held the metal box tightly against her chest. She hesitated at the doorway, listening to the rising tension outside. Fear told her to stay hidden, but another feeling pushed stronger, the belief that hiding had already cost too much. The wind slammed a shutter against the wall with a loud crack. Everyone outside turned toward the house at once. The girl stepped into the doorway, clutching the box. And the moment the strangers saw what she was holding, their calm expressions vanished completely. The yard fell silent the moment the girl stepped forward. The wind still moved through the dry grass, but no one spoke. The stranger's attention locked onto the metal box in her hands, their confidence slipping into something sharper, almost desperate. "That doesn't belong to you." the older man said quickly, taking a step closer. The man from the porch moved without thinking, placing himself between them and the girl. He could feel her trembling behind him, yet she did not back away. "My father said this was proof," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Proof the ranch was never meant to be taken." The strangers exchanged uneasy looks. The younger one muttered under his breath, frustration showing for the first time. Whatever they expected to find buried in the abandoned ranch, they had not expected a child to guard it. "What proof?" the man asked gently, glancing back at her. She hesitated, then opened the box. Inside lay a bundle of old papers wrapped carefully in cloth, along with a small tarnished badge and several faded photographs. The wind caught the edges of the documents as she lifted them, revealing official seals and signatures. Land records, agreements, letters written decades earlier. Her father had explained it once by lantern light. The ranch had belonged to families who worked the land together long before developers tried to claim it. When drought struck years ago, outsiders offered money and promises, convincing people to sign contracts they barely understood. Most left believing they had no choice. But one owner refused and gathered evidence showing the deals were dishonest, never legally completed. "He stayed to protect it," the girl said softly. "My father said the ranch was still ours. That one day someone honest might come." The older stranger's expression hardened. "Those papers are worthless now," but his voice lacked certainty. The man took one of the documents carefully, scanning the faded writing. Even without legal training, he recognized stamps from the county office and signatures that matched the property records he had signed days earlier. The ranch had been sold cheaply because its ownership was tangled in disputes no one wanted to reopen. "You knew?" the man said, looking at the strangers. "You were waiting for someone to buy it so you could take whatever claim was left," neither answered. In the distance, another sound carried across the prairie. Not an engine this time, but a sheriff's vehicle approaching along the main road. Someone in town must have noticed the unfamiliar trucks lingering too long. The strangers stiffened, their confidence finally cracking. "This isn't finished," the older man said quietly before turning back toward his truck. "Maybe it is," the man replied. Within minutes, both vehicles pulled away, dust trailing behind them until the land grew quiet again. The ranch seemed to breathe out, releasing years of tension into the open sky. The girl stood still, clutching the box as if unsure what happened next. The man knelt beside her, lowering his voice. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said. "We'll figure this out together." For the first time since he had met her, she smiled, small but real. Days later, the truth settled through town. The abandoned ranch was no longer a mystery or a rumor. With the documents confirmed, the land's history was restored, protecting it from those who tried to claim it unfairly. Neighbors began stopping by, offering tools, food, and stories about the families who once worked the fields. The ranch slowly came back to life. Fences were repaired, windows opened to sunlight. The barn stood strong again under careful hands. What began as a $1 gamble turned into something far greater than land ownership. It became a home built on trust, courage, and second chances. Some evenings, as the sun dipped low over the prairie, the man would sit on the porch while the girl laughed nearby, the sound carrying across the fields that no longer felt empty. The ranch was not abandoned anymore. Its story had simply been waiting for the right people to continue it. And in the quiet glow of those western sunsets, the land finally felt at peace, holding not secrets this time, but hope for everything still to come.